Rahui Katini.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. When the Finance and Expenditure Committee met on 9 February this year, the impact of last year's Canterbury earthquake weighed heavily on all of our minds. The discussion with the Minister of Finance included some of the immediate impacts of the quake, the need for support for small businesses, the inevitable increases in unemployment, the cost to the Crown of some $1.5 billion to cover the net costs of the Earthquake Commission, the consequences of $5 billion worth of damage and its associated reduction in economic activity. Mr Speaker, as dire as these impacts are, nothing prepared us for the profound cost to the nation that would accrue from the events of 22 February. And so I stand here today painfully aware that when the committee had its second reading on this report, my colleagues and I from Canterbury were immersed in the most catastrophic tragedy of our time, a tragedy that will cost us dearly. Best guess assumptions from the Treasury indicate the total cost of both the Canterbury earthquakes will be $15 billion. There is no question that we have to factor in the combined effects of these natural disasters on the government's finances and the wider New Zealand economy for many years ahead. The government's balance sheet plays an important role in the economy, including the drive to maintain low overall costs of capital raising by improving New Zealand's credit rating and providing financial flexibility to support the economy in times of distress such as post-earthquake. What we all know and accept is that the government will have to pay for the rebuilding of Christchurch by short-term loans, but also through giving priority to Ōtautahi over some other government spending. But there's some very interesting statements made in the 2010 investment statement which have particular bearing at this time. Basically, that statement suggests the government's balance sheet can be better managed. It issues some direct challenges to rebuild the government's balance sheet as a buffer against future adverse events. It suggests we must systematically work to reduce the government's risk by strengthening the economy and calls for an approach to sharpen incentives on government agencies to use existing money well. I was heartened by the statement of the Minister of Finance this last weekend in committing to an approach which he described as protecting the most vulnerable, adding, and I quote, "Any spending changes we make will ensure that continues." This is music to the ears of the Māori Party. The Māori Party entered into a coalition agreement with National with the following commitment, and again I quote, "The Māori Party seeks significant outcomes in whānau ora through eliminating poverty, advocating for social justice and advancing Māori social, cultural, economic and community development in the best interests of the nation." These words are as vital now as they ever have been. It has given me an insight into the communities we might describe as the most vulnerable, which I will never forget. Over the last fortnight, I have walked the streets of Wainoni, New Brighton, Aranui, Bexley, Dallington. These were communities already vulnerable from low income, high unemployment and a range of other social and health needs. But it has been devastating to see how unprepared so many of our people have been for an emergency of such proportion. Over the weekend, the Māori wardens reported to me that as they went door to door, they came across a woman who was dehydrated and in 2 weeks had not been visited once. For people in the eastern suburbs, we've had the additional pressure of shops being closed, access routes blocked, lack of petrol, basic absence of sanitation and water facilities. Some people were getting food grants, but then denied petrol vouchers and subsequently lacking the means to travel across town to get basic supplies for their families. We really need to teach our people to look beyond today and prepare for tomorrow. One of the key issues arising from this crisis has been the need for greater efforts to occur to ensure our families are self-determining and self-managing. And this is where it comes back to the notion outlined in the investment statement of getting better value for money through the services provided by the state. This is also where the whānau ora's leadership with the Māori Party's leadership with whānau ora has been so critical. We believe that one of the most fundamental revolutions of our time has been the mobilisation of whānau through investing in whānau to build their capability rather than resorting to dependence on service. One of the greatest success stories of our term has been the rollout of some 25 provider collectives with 158 providers across 10 regions, building whānau resilience and independence. That is what I want our mokopuna to benefit from in our future, having whānau which are self-managing, who are living healthy lifestyles and who are participating fully in society. Anyone can rant and rave about what isn't being done, but the greatest outcomes come from those who actually get up and do, and that is why we're so proud of the momentum achieved through whānau ora. I have been so pleased over the last 2 weeks to see whānau ora in action in Christchurch, with Ngāi Tahu, Mātau Waka and the Māori providers working with government agencies to support the most vulnerable in our communities. But in having said that, I want to return to the Finance Minister's words about protecting the most vulnerable. Earlier today, the Child Poverty Action Group issued a release drawing attention to research from the University of Auckland demonstrating that many low-income families are unable to afford even a basic nutritious diet for their children. The group called on government to help all families better afford nutritious food by extending the in-work tax credit to all low-income families. It is a call which the Māori Party supports. I have done all that I could to encourage the government to consider the elimination of poverty as one goal that could be progressed through my private members' bill to address rising food prices by removing goods and services tax from healthy food as defined by the Ministry of Health. But that is not all we're doing in our determination to make our nation great again by investing in ourselves. This is about investing in opportunity and in the optimism that all families need to experience to be the best that they can be. And so on other fronts we have actively campaigned against so-called loan sharks to protect our most vulnerable from paying excessive interest rates. My colleague Tūrero Flavel currently has a bill on the order paper focused on gambling harm reduction, the purpose being to provide local communities with more power to determine where pokie machines may be sited and how the proceeds can be distributed. We will continue to apply concentrated efforts to our campaign to lift the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour, in our absolute belief that raising low incomes will improve the country's economic performance while at the same time supporting families. And we will, as always, maintain the vigilance that is needed for any MP worth their salt to be in the House, to monitor the policies that are debated, to place pressure where pressure is due, and above all, to come up with ideas worth investing in. Protecting the most vulnerable, whether it be post-earthquake or low-income families struggling to make do, must be the mantra for all of us to apply to every issue debated in Parliament. This is the time for collective responsibility, shouldering the responsibilities of working together to absorb the worst effects of the recession over the past 2 years and to rebuild and restore. We must make the best of the lessons we have learned over this last difficult year and commit to an approach which places priority on environmentally friendly, sustainable development, on working together to create our communities, and on strengthening all of our families to build our future together.
David Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.